My name is Sandra Santos, and I am the proud principal of World Language Middle School for Columbus City Schools.
My choice was deliberate. I'm a product of Columbus City Schools, so I understood from early on that Columbus City Schools is a caring community of educators. As an instructional leader, I have an opportunity to form a student's future. And so through forming it, I work with social workers, teachers, parents. And so as the instructional leader, I can implement various instruction intervention that will help to support students.
So one of the specific resources that I thought was super powerful for me to be a first-year principal was a principal coach. The principal coach role really helped me in the supports of budgeting, knowing how to manage my time, knowing how to support my community, knowing how to build that culture and climate, and knowing how to get my students ready, because even in middle school, as a building principal, my kids have to be ready for the next level, which is high school.
So I always try to let my kids know that they are one of my kids, and I'm going to treat them as if they were my own. And so I think just having that sense of community and giving them a sense of belonging, and I always let them know too that even when they leave me, they will always be one of my students. And so no matter how far removed or how far away they grow older in life, they will still always be one of my kids. And so just that sense of community and sense of belonging, and letting them know that they matter and that they're important, even when they're not at their best sometimes, they still matter and they're still very important.
Columbus is a great place to live and work. Our town has grown into a major urban area. Columbus is the 14th largest city in the country, and so we've grown into a major urban area. However, it still has that small town feel. It has something for everyone.
The diversity in Columbus, whether you're in the city or in the surrounding suburbs, diversity makes us stronger. And so I think that's one of the things that makes Columbus very special. The opportunities that Columbus has afforded to me, and they took a chance on me, I say take that leap of faith and come to Columbus.
I would say you owe it to yourself to work for Columbus City Schools. You will have a rich experience of whatever you choose to do. If you want to work as a teacher, if you want to work at the building level as a secretary, or if you want a central office position, it is a great place to come to network, to hone your skills, and to not only that, but to pour into people.
We are educating future doctors, lawyers, educators, and entrepreneurs. Our students are very important. I tell my students daily that they were great before me and they continue to be great after me, and I mean that because our students have made my teachers great and they have made me great as well.
Welcome to Columbus, Ohio, the 14th largest city in the U.S. and still growing. A beautiful and affordable city to live in, with a cost of living 10% lower than the national average according to Payscale.com. Columbus is a terrific place to live and raise a family, with the median single-family home costing $344,000. Home to several Fortune 500 companies, including Nationwide Insurance, American Electric Power, and L Brands. Among the city's skyline, 3 professional sports complexes. The Columbus Blue Jackets, Columbus Crew, and Columbus Clippers are all within walking distance of each other in the Arena District. Just north of downtown, a more spirited atmosphere where you can hear students at the Shoe cheering on the Ohio State University football team. It's a city where there's always something going on. Columbus is a bustling city with hidden gems. From the visual and performance arts to botanical gardens and historical museums, Columbus is a growing and thriving city full of cultural experiences. It's a wildly diverse place to live, with demographics mirroring the United States. Founded in 1845, the district was first known as Columbus Public Schools. That changed in 2007 when school leaders changed the name to what we know it as now, Columbus City Schools. It's one of 16 school districts in Franklin County and is also the largest of those 16, with 45,000 students enrolled. The district has representation from more than 100 countries. That's why there's a big effort here to meet students and families where they are, offering language assistance for anyone who needs it. For students, specialty language immersion programs with native speaking instructors are offered starting in pre-K. Other individualized programs are available to students who need hearing assistance, want to focus on the arts, or are looking for more STEM-related hands-on learning. In fact, the district relies on hundreds of partners to ensure students are getting experience in a variety of fields. As Intel builds a chip manufacturing plant here, those workers are already bringing STEM coding projects into our schools for students. And another partner, the Columbus Crew, is helping to improve attendance through a Stay in the Game initiative. Giving students exposure to those partners can help them determine their future. Career Technical Education takes exploring those options even further. With 2 career tech high schools and several middle schools with CTE options, students can begin thinking about their future at any age. Programs like information technology, healthcare, and construction technologies give them hands-on experience and college credit. CCS works to prepare students for any post-secondary career, whether it's trade-related or requires a college degree. Students don't have to make those big decisions alone. I Know I Can is our main resource that helps students determine their path. It's a Columbus-based college access program with advisors working one-on-one with high schoolers on their next steps. City Year is another partner that provides our students with a mentor at their school who can lead them in the best direction. College is a goal for many students at CCS. A partnership with Columbus State Community College can give them that experience at a low or even no cost. It's a stepping stone they can use to get to the district's other partner schools, The Ohio State University, Otterbein University, and Ohio Dominican University. Those opportunities to attend partner universities aren't only available to students, but to staff as well. Continuing education is offered at several universities in the state. Staff members can gain specialized education through the district and participate in several professional development sessions held throughout the year. It's just one effort made on behalf of 9,000 employees who support our students every day. We have dedicated teachers, some of whom have worked with students here for more than 50 years. A passion for helping students that can be felt throughout the district and community. This is Columbus City Schools.
This is our 3rd year for Say My Name event, and what is powerful is that we have over 300 girls come from 18 different schools, grades 4 through 12, to empower them and to show them that they have a voice and that they could be their authentic selves in any space. It's very important that we have high school students here intermingling with middle school students and elementary students so that they have a goal and they see where they can be and they get excited about graduating.
People to look up to, like student athletes and stuff, and they have a good future for themselves. And that's something I want to have, a good future.
To me, this event is a good way for young girls and older girls like me to come together and see what we all can do as a whole group and team.
What we want to do is break stereotypes for young girls and make sure that, being loud and being joyful isn't seen as a negative, but a positive of expression through art, through painting, through dance, through song, through hair care classes, so that they have great self-confidence, great self-esteem, and they have a great self-direction in life.
It is an opportunity for us to celebrate our young girls, to acknowledge them, to amplify their voices, to hear them. We want them to know that we appreciate them, we love them, we see them, and we are here to support them.
And once we all come together at this event, it's all of the girls in Region 2 to see each other, to have common conversation, to understand, you know what, I do have a voice. I am worthy, I am valued. The beauty of being at the art museum is to see the art that takes place.
I enjoyed the painting, I really enjoyed the painting, the self-portraits. I enjoyed that they gave us free stuff, lip gloss and gifts and stuff when we came, that the energy was good and that they welcomed us.
It's good because you get to talk to new people and share what you have in common. It was pretty fun outside. We learned karate and it was a pretty awesome day.
What an awesome opportunity for our elementary girls to see that middle school and high school girls are able to share and have conversations with them.
I like that I could be an example towards them because, they're still growing up. Well, I'm still growing up too, but, they look up to us and, we're role models for them.
I think it's good to know, for some young ladies, to know that you're not alone and that it's not always about, the bad things, and that we can all come together and make something positive all together. We can help each other and not make it envious or a competition, and that we're all here and we're on the same boat.
I think today, with battling so many negative connotations on social media and how people use social media, this gives them an opportunity to post positive things and to say, I belong, I matter, I'm loved, I'm nurtured. And so it's that counter narrative to some of the things that cause anxiety and depression.
You are unique, you are beautiful, you are brave, and we got you. We are here with you, we stand alongside you, and you can accomplish anything that your heart desires.
I chose to work in the district because I grew up in Columbus City Schools. I loved my teachers. I had very compassionate, very caring, very nurturing teachers, and I had a wonderful experience. So therefore, I wanted to give back to the community because I emulate just like the teachers did for me.
I have had an amazing experience as a professional in Columbus City Schools. I had a previous work experience in the business sector, and I also worked for another school district. And I can honestly say that the most professional growth that I've ever gained in my career has been through this district. From my literacy expertise that I was able to accomplish in my time here, that occurred in Columbus City Schools. From the leadership experience and promotion and increasing my knowledge just around leading a team of people, again, occurred in Columbus City Schools.
I've always believed in giving back. I come from a family of teachers on my mom's side and military personnel on my dad's side, so we've always believed in giving back, and Columbus City Schools seemed like the perfect opportunity to give back and kind of help shape the future of the whole city I've been living in. And the city has provided so much for me, so I wanted to provide something back to the city. The most rewarding experience has been able to give our students one-to-one device. Each student in Columbus City Schools has a device today. The pandemic affected us all in different ways. We're still somewhat paying for it. Social emotional issues for us personally, as well as our families and the families we serve. But the most rewarding experience I would say that has come out of it is our ability to provide for our students. We were never a one-to-one district. It was part of my dream for 3 to 5 years. We made it happen in 3 months. The leadership intern at Linden McKinley wrote to me and said, hey, this was like Christmas for some of our students. They've never unwrapped a new present. And that, made me tear up. At the same time, I was like, wow, we are able to make that impact. The team worked very hard to make that impact. And I was like, that is what I want to tell.
I feel we impact the students' success because we work with parents and families and students to ensure that any problem, any mediation that we can do to work with the building principal and district leaders to resolve their concerns.
I moved here from India 24 years ago, and I've made it home. I've had 2 children here, raised them here. So many startups. The ecosystem is so rich for technology that I've never had to look for a job, So it is so rich with technology, and it's important for me being in a city like that. And I feel right now in my role, it's especially important for our students because they have tremendous amount of opportunity to go make their careers in technology in the city right now.
For someone considering a career in Columbus City Schools, I would say go for it. This is the best place, and I can honestly say that from the bottom of my heart, to work. Columbus City Schools is a family. You're not going to get a better support system. You're not going to get a better district that's going to encourage your development and really actually provide you the tools to increase your knowledge, increase your leadership, and to increase your impact.
We are the largest district in the state, so therefore we have more opportunities for educators, and we have a lot more support and a lot more chances for someone, if they want to move up or change careers inside the district, they can.
So excited to welcome our students back to the first day of school for the new school year this year, where our theme is Dream Big and Achieve More. We want our students and families to know that our entire staff is ready to welcome our students back and primed and positioned to help them achieve their goals this year.
The The first day is the absolute best. It's what we have worked so hard for all summer. We have been preparing and just anxious for the students to come back. We're ready for them to get going and get closer to meeting their goals and being successful here. So we as a staff are very excited on the first day.
I want to thank everyone for coming to the 2024-25 school year. Welcome to the newly updated Scoutwood. I'm so excited to share all of our updates with you guys, and I can't thank everybody who worked so hard to get it done. We had 90 days over the summer to get this done, and they did an amazing job.
Hi, I'm Ansley Stevenson, Project Manager for our Capital Improvements Department here at Columbus City Schools, and I want to walk you through Mifflin High School, our biggest renovation project this summer. We're here at Mifflin High School. We're in the cafeteria space, and this is the heart of the school. It connects to the auditorium and it also connects to the gymnasium space. We've opened this space up completely, installed a brand new glass wall. It connects for athletic events, it connects for students that are eating and utilizing the gymnasium during lunchtime. We have a brand new dividing curtain. We've completely reoriented the gym. So now we have 2 fully functional practice areas and a fully functional competition court. We are in the new student support services area of Mifflin High School. We identified this as an underutilized area of the building, and we're relocating all of those student support services to one centralized area in the building for students to access. Previously, it was very inefficiently laid out. These services were spread throughout the buildings, typically within another classroom space, where privacy and access were both an issue. So making it easier for our students to access those support services and gather them all in one private area of the building. Here at Mifflin, all classroom spaces are getting renovated. We'll have new ceilings and dimmable LED lighting throughout. All of the classrooms will be equipped with brand new magnetic whiteboards and tack boards, and also a new classroom sound amplification system. The number one piece of student feedback we heard was the lockers were too small. So we took this opportunity to do new lockers throughout that are appropriately sized for our students' needs and also reduce the number. Reducing the number allowed us to open up some of these extended learning areas that'll be full of soft, flexible seating.
I hope that the students feel a sense of accomplishment. I hope they feel proud about what they created. I hope they feel like they, really can do anything.
I want to dance for the rest of my life because I've been doing it up until now, so I still want to do it forever.
You taught me this in Dance 1, that dance is like a universal language.
And over time, I've really realized that my role here has become not necessarily teaching them about the art form of dance, but using dance as a way to understand yourself in the world. And when you understand yourself, then you are able to do more.
So I can say personally, the connection you have with your students and that you want them to do better.
Look at that smile.
You're here.
That way we know it works.
Yeah.
I can log off anytime.
Yeah. That might be her walking in. All right. We will call to order the Policy and Governance Committee meeting for the Columbus City Schools. Would you call the roll for us?
Yes.
Kyle?
Chair Ingalls.
Here.
Jennifer Adair.
Dr. Pierce. Kelsey Ellingson.
Present.
Dr. Joanne Lunsford. Javante McDonald.
Present.
Danielle Smith.
Here.
Jesse Vogel.
I'm here.
Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. First thing on our agenda tonight is the approval of the minutes. You all should have before you the meeting minutes from our last meeting, June 27th, 2024. We all had a chance to review the minutes. Okay. Any corrections? Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
This is Danielle Smith. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from June 27th.
Second the motion, anyone?
Second.
Great. Kyle, would you call the roll, please?
Chair Ingalls.
Yes.
Kelsey Ellingson.
Yes.
Javante McDonald.
Yes.
Danielle Smith.
Yes.
Jesse Vogel.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, we are moving on to item 3.1, which is a discussion today. I have asked some members of our administrative team to come and talk with us a little bit about the closing of school buildings policy, which is policy number 7105. We have recently undergone a task force process by which the administration has made certain recommendations for the closing of certain school buildings. And through that process, we have learned that there may be some changes that we want to make to that policy for the next iteration of school closings. And so what we have done is ask our administration to come and share with us a little bit about the process, the purpose, and a vision for the future of what we would like to see out of this policy so that we can be more effective as a district when we think about looking at a school consolidation or school closing. And with that, there may be additional policies that we want to look at while we're looking at this specific policy, which is 7105. But we want to talk about that as a group and open that up. And so today, really, the vision is to get a brief overview, get some understanding, build some foundational knowledge, and then we can go forward and identify any new information that we may want as a committee, any research that we may want to conduct, and then how we want to move forward. So with that, I will pass it over to Mr. Brown and Mr. Woods, and I'm not sure which one of you would like to go first, but if you would like to give us a brief overview.
Well, thank you, Chair Ingalls. So with the last name of Woods, I pretty much have gone last all of my life, right? So this time I'm going to take the opportunity to go before Brown, which is a B. But thank you for the opportunity to be here. We think that this is a timely conversation. We thought that we would set it up in two parts. I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of the big picture, the 30,000-foot level, kind of what I've seen in the district as I've been engaging with staff and with community stakeholders. I'm relatively new to the district, so I've had a great opportunity to spend some time listening and learning and developing what I think is probably a good vision for the overall capital improvements program, and which school closing is just one aspect of that. So I'm going to talk about the big picture, and then I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Brown, who's going to talk a little bit about his experience or lessons learned or takeaways from the work that we actually did with the task force. And then we'll pause at that point and hopefully open up for questions and or dialogue. So as I've been in the district, you know, I'm really excited about what's going on here in Columbus, but I continue to hear multiple conversations. And conversations involve things like the vacant land that we have. It involved things like our FMP plan that we have, which focuses on school closures and new buildings. Conversations involve things like consolidations of sites maybe even partnerships of some sites. So as I've been talking with the capital improvement team and engaging with conversations with some vendors, we see a tremendous opportunity to create what I'm calling an integrated plan that pulls all of these vehicles or assets into a cogent 3-year, 5-year, whatever time length we determine, plan, so that we're not having these conversations in siloed venues, because many of them are related anyway when we think about it. So part of the vision is to have an integrated multi-year plan. I think that it would be valuable if we could come back to the board annually to do a refresh or an update of that plan. That might be one consideration for the policy. And I also believe that as we think about school closures in general, the plan currently has some factors for consideration. I think we need to really tighten up or understand what the criteria is for closing a school. And then once a school meets that criteria, it's put on some type of list, and then there's a determination made around what to do with the school and when. So not going too much into details, but just trying to give a general overview of how I see the big picture dovetailing into this work around closing of school buildings. The last thing that I'll say is there are a couple related policies. Ms. Ingalls, you mentioned that. But I also think about the policy 7100, the facilities planning policy. That policy currently mentions a facilities master plan. I think as we go forward in the district, the plan will be broader than what a typical facilities master plan looks like. And again, I reference that as kind of like an integrated plan that brings together all these different opportunities that we have in our portfolio. So I'll pause there, see if there's any questions around the vision or the big picture, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Brown.
Any questions from the committee? Mr. Woods, would you explain the difference between the policy that we're specifically looking at as written and what our facilities master plan is, and why it would be important to integrate those two plans together?
So the facilities master plan, the current one, I don't recall the actual year that it was done, but it was a multi-step or stage plan. I believe it had 7 stages to it. I believe we're probably stage 4 or 5, but it really focuses on looking at our data, looking at our demographics, and at that time making some recommendations around buildings that we should consider closing. And it also made some recommendations around new builds and how we should do that. And that's usually the scope of a typical facilities master plan. It's focused on closures and new buildings, and that's what we have here in the district. I would say that it's probably needs to be updated, and we are in the process of doing some of that right now as we're back out in the market assessing our facilities, again, to get the updated data on all of our assets.
I guess, Judge.
Yeah, Mr. Vogel, go ahead.
It's fine, okay. So I guess, thanks, Mr. Woods. Just to follow up, I think, on Chair Ingalls' question, I guess I'm trying to understand what is the, so there exists a facilities master plan, and you're thinking about a vision for a future, what you called integrated plan.
Yeah.
What's the difference between those two and how do they relate?
Yeah, so thank you for the question, Mr. Vogel. So I keep reiterating, a facilities master plan is relatively narrow. When you think about all the options that we have at our disposal here in the district, we have vacant land, for example. You know, what are we going to do with the vacant land? We have buildings that are underutilized. Don't necessarily need to be closed, but there's some capacity in those buildings. You know, are there opportunities for partnerships or for consolidations? All of those conversations are broader than just the opening of new buildings and closing of old buildings. So when I think about the integrated master plan, it's really incorporating some of those other, I call them assets that we have in our portfolio into the conversation. Does that help a little bit?
Yes, thanks very much. I appreciate it.
I think it might also be helpful to clarify and kind of level set in terms of one master plan or district. It's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, we do not have a facility master plan at this time. We have recommendations that have come from a facilities master plan task force that the board took particular action on to say thank you for those recommendations, but we do not have a facility master plan. Facility master plans, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I think it'd be helpful for us to have a definition, really looks at strategically what Mr. Woods is saying, how we are using our facilities and resources 5 years and beyond, right? And so I think we are at a juncture where we are figuring out, one, how to establish a facility master plan and how to then write a policy that establishes that facility master plan. Am I understanding this correctly?
Yeah, so it's a two-part response. So yes, you are. Again, I keep reiterating that it's broader than just a facilities master plan. I think that's something that I want this committee and the other committees that we're engaging with to take away from this conversation. It has to be a plan that takes into consideration all of the different assets and options that we have at our disposal. So you're right in the fact that we do need to develop a master plan. I would just caveat and say that it's facilities plus master plan. So that's one aspect of it. The second piece is in my research, I have come across FMP that was developed for Columbus City Schools. I don't know what the actual status of that is. I don't know if we've put that to bed. I'm not 100% sure, and again, I probably need to go back and do some additional research, but in the 90 days that I've been here, I have gathered a plethora of information, and part of that information was a master plan that was done back, I don't even want to put the year out, but it's been quite a while.
Yeah.
You may have more insight to that.
And that's why I would just concisely say that we are at a juncture where we are working for a facilities plus master plan and the policy that will guide us along in that work.
That is correct.
In considering the question of the related policy, there's this, you said, you referenced policy 7100, 7100. Does that provide a process for creating the facilities master plan, or is that just referring to something that was created? I mean, is there a process in place for how that should be created, or?
So through the chair, do we want to talk about 7100?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the 7100 facilities plan really talks about the board ensuring that there is a multi-year long-term plan for the district. So it's everything that Dr. Tina Pierce is mentioning. That's what's referenced in this facilities planning document, specifically the one that exists today, which was effective 7/15, references a facilities master plan. So that's what exists today.
And for the committee, so we have policy 7100, which is the facilities planning policy, 7105, which is the one on our docket for today, but all of these really are integrated. 7105 is the closing of school buildings. We also have policy 7300, which is the disposition of real property and personal property, and then surplus property is 7310. And there may be other investment-related policies, et cetera, that we should review in the course of crafting this ideal policy. So the scope of today is to really get us kick-started and thinking about where we might want to go with this. Any other questions at this point from the committee? Okay. Seeing none, Mr. Brown, or Mr. Woods, do you have anything else for us?
No, I think we're good. Thank you.
So I think I would echo many of the things that Mr. Woods said. Having worked with this policy with a committee, many of the things that Mr. Woods brought up were sticking points. You know, folks in the committee were questioning, well, what are you doing with the properties that have been closed already? This is, you know, a point of interest for folks. Another sort of sticking point in terms of going through this policy is less than explicit in terms of what community engagement will look like. And oftentimes a policy like this would have a section in it that would talk about having a number of board hearings, for example, out in the community to get formal feedback from the community connected to this. There would be other pieces that would be in this. I don't believe that we have a boundary policy in place. So this policy assumes that we're closing buildings and defining boundaries at the same time, and those are very different tasks.
Can you explain to the committee what that means? What does what would a boundary policy do?
So if we go to, you know, the example of FMP, we could come up with a couple examples of where we would need to define a boundary for a building, a catchment area for a building. If you build a new building, you know, it's now in a space in the geography, and you have to define, well, where the kid's going to come from for that. And that usually involves a community engagement process that then produces a recommendation to the board for where those boundaries should be, has a set of criteria that looks very similar to this, and talks about a process for defining what those boundaries should be. Those tend to be done a little bit more intimately connected to the community that's going to be impacted. Whereas when you're talking about a consolidation across the whole system, this is across the whole system as a whole. So I think pulling that out, and again, it's a connected policy piece. So what do you do with properties that you already have? If you're consolidating buildings, then when does a boundary process come into place, and what policy governs that as you move forward? And then formalizing, again, what the public engagement component of that looks like. Focused on the committee, but also then focused on what does the public engagement component with the board look like as well. These are things that I would usually see specified in a policy like this. And then finally, that I think a point that played out in the media a little bit, often a policy like this would have some guidance in terms of the composition of a committee. You know, what proportion will be parents? What, you know, would we limit it to people who live within the city bounds or not? It would have some guidance about the membership and makeup of the committee. And again, the policy as written is a little silent. But I think Mr. Woods makes, you know, I think a really cogent point in that these policies can't be considered in separation. They all have to interdigitate with each other, and they have to be coherent as they come together.
Question. Thank you so much, Dr. Brown, for sharing that information. So from the perspective of the work that you recently completed with our task force facilities committee, are there recommendations that you would give this committee to inform how we approach, one, the policy piece, and two, the facility master plan plus piece? And then, Mr. Woods, could you also be able to provide suggested recommendations? And could those suggested recommendations be in the form of a high-level executive summary, a memo that provides the lenses through which the work should be done and a rationale for why?
Yes.
Thank you.
What other questions do we have? And please don't be shy, because if you have questions here, you know people at home watching have questions.
Oh, I thought you might be going for yours. I guess it's me just on the mic here. May I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Just to clarify, I want to respect that there are different tenures here. You said you've been here for 90 days, Mr. Woods. Mr. Brown, how long have you been with the district?
3 years.
3 years, okay. I think it was maybe in 2017, while I was at City Council, I sat on one of the FMPs. the facility masters planning committees. And just thinking about that experience and then witnessing this most recent process, I'm curious if, for the collective memory in the room, what has the district's success historically been with regard to the recommendations and implementing the recommendations that come out of this process?
Historically, I don't think that the last 2 rounds of this have not been accepted. And no action's been taken, correct?
I would say, how do we define success? Because if we are having robust conversations, if we are in fact assessing the conditions and qualities of buildings, if our administration is taking very deep dives into our enrollment and school assignment patterns, we are doing that work and have done that work, and I think that has been successful. If we are defining success in terms of the board accepting the recommendations, I would say that there is still work to be done around how and under the conditions that those recommendations should be accepted. So I think there has been very robust work and dialogue around it. I think where the rubber meets the road is around some things that a policy could help us clearly define and flesh out a little bit more. When you look at what's before us right now in terms of the 12 different, and it might be more than 12, A through O, the variables that should be taken into account, that is a very robust list. Some of those from a priority perspective may change. So even if we think about when you served on the committee in 2017, our enrollment was very different than our enrollment is now, right? But we have to be forward thinking about what our future enrollment is going to be looking like. So we have to think about a burden, a potential cost now that we have to be very mindful of are building requirements in terms of safety, you know, in terms of doors and door stops and things of those nature and accessibility, right? And so the prioritization of those different items and categories is going to change from committee to committee. And so I think, again, where the rubber meets the road is in how and under what conditions do we accept those recommendations, knowing and understanding that we put a committee in place that is looking at one particular point in time and probably historically what has happened and what they're seeing, but we probably need to spend more time being future and forward thinking about where this district is going.
Thank you for that context. Just an observation, you mentioned it, Mr. Brown, that I think it was Mr. Brown that mentioned that there isn't a community engagement item on here, and as I was sitting at home on maternity leave, mostly out of kind of the echo chamber and just observing, that seemed to be a big call from the community, so I definitely think that merits to be included here. Your external stakeholders, but also your internal stakeholders who are most affected. Your mention of the boundaries, should I understand that as the feeder patterns? Is that the same thing to you?
No.
So, okay, can we clarify that?
I mean, those are definitely related constructs, and actually I think this policy is a little silent on that. Oftentimes, when school boundaries are set up, part of the desire is to maintain an integrated feeder pattern to a high school. To avoid disruptions and discontinuities for the student groups as they go from one school level to another. This policy is silent on that. When I'm talking boundary, I'm actually talking about a catchment area for a particular building and which students would be attending that building by address. And so obviously, you know, if we put a new building in, then you have to define that area. But if you consolidate 2 buildings, then one has to figure out where those students then will subsequently go by address. And typically, I would see a different policy speaking to that process because that is a process in and unto itself that typically involves deep community engagement, so that the people who live closest to that decision are deeply involved in that decision-making process, versus a policy that's looking writ large to the system and making decisions for the system as a whole. very different process, both very important, but they fit together, sort of like a hand in glove. And it was a pressure point in conversations with people when we were out doing community engagement. This was a pressure point. Another pressure point was tied to the FMP. Well, hey, you know, this building, we talked about doing X, Y, or Z in the FMP for this building. Now we're talking about doing something else. Help me understand how these things fit together. So again, this idea of bringing them all together in a way that they're integrated and cohesive and help inform a public engagement process to inform these types of decisions, I think is incredibly important.
Hey, continue. Just, could you clarify where in the policy you're looking at then? I see the feeder pattern mention on N, and then there's relocation, which is D. Is that what you're talking about? I just don't see boundaries or catchments in there.
It's not in here.
Oh, you want, okay, got it. I thought you were saying it.
Whole
does
separate
address
policy.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Thank you very much. So I think in tandem with that, even though they are, the matter of where students go deserves its own deep conversation. I think it leaves giant questions in people's minds if they're the one place they know for all of its assets and its flaws is going away. Being able to know what's next, to have some semblance of a clue, I think would help. What I've noticed from the outside is it seems to be that there's just this overwhelming outpouring of community input at the end, and I know that there were some meetings along the way, but there is responsive leadership at the district, and so when you hear that, it gives you pause necessarily, and I think that that's great, but it's in the district's interest to be able to move forward with things. So as much as all these different policies are interwoven, being able to address them somehow, to some extent simultaneously, because you serve everyone, and you serve people with lots of political power, and you serve people who don't have any political power, and we have to help them all. So just getting to where they are, at their building, in their school, in front of their teachers and parents and students alike, I think is just really important. So I'll just pause there. I have other questions, but I'm sure other members do.
So through the chair, I want to follow up as I'm thinking and as I'm listening. You know, this is a complicated policy. It's a complicated conversation, but we can't make it complicated when we're talking to the community. So I think as the committee, you know, even when we think about things like factors or criteria, right now I'm counting 15, and the letter O says other variables, right? So as a committee, does it make sense to go big and broad and add more? Or does it make sense to bucket some of these into the most compelling criteria in a way that's digestible for the average person in the community? That's just something to think about as I listen to this complex policy conversation that we're having here.
And I wonder if it could be a yes and moment where we're bucketing those priorities as it relates to the school closings. And the way I really would like us to think about or frame school closings is really a redesign of learning buildings, right? And so we have a number of buildings that are vacant and buildings that could be proposed to be closed, but at the same time, we have a number of students in our community, be it the 800 students that are on the wait list for Head Start, that need buildings that they can go learn in. We have workforce development adults that need buildings that they can go and learn in. We have senior citizens that need buildings that they can go and learn in while their caregivers are at work or need a break. So there are plenty of educational needs in our community, and if we have the space, we should, as a leading partner, be able to share that space. So I think even at how we approach this policy, it shouldn't, or we might think about expanding it beyond the closing of school buildings and rename it to the redesign of school buildings, right? Just the very framing of that changes the public perception. So that's one. So as I think about the framing of redesigning our school buildings, maybe there are some buckets that we can create where some of these elements naturally flow into, right? So it may be a matter of capacity. It may be a matter of burden when we're thinking about redesigning a building, but that could be very different when we're thinking about building a new building, right? So building a new building, we may be looking at accessibility, because I think about our students that have physical needs, who may have visual needs, that we need to update some of our facilities so it is accessible for all of those needs. So that accessibility issue might be more prevalent when we are looking at a new build, right? So I think as we think about where we can put things into a bucket, if we could be innovative, if we could be creative and courageous and step out there and reframe and rename some stuff as we're creating these buckets, I think it would be a win-win for our community.
Do I have to press this button? No, I'm good to go.
Should be good.
All right,
As long as you see the green light, it's on the
So,
recording.
as I look at the factors A through O, and we're speaking about making these buckets for each one, to simplify this a bit, my question is there any prioritization of what these factors are? And if there is going to be prioritization of these factors, will that shift depending on the school or community that we're speaking on based on their assessment of needs?
So I would venture to say that's the work of this committee, is to figure out what that prioritization is. Again, as you think about redesigning school buildings versus building new school buildings, what are the prioritized lists that go under that? But I think the constant isn't, should there be a question of a community that should kind of be prioritized in that discussion, right? Our community is ever the same. So as I think about my aunt's experience at East High School, she's going to give the same experience and have the same passion that she had as a student as she has now as an alumni who is calling me, questioning me about what's happening at East High School. That's not going to change, even though she doesn't live in that community anymore. And her kids didn't attend that school, right? I didn't attend that school. I can't. Okay, I did have a cousin that recently attended there and graduated, so let me back that up a bit. Gosh, probably recently in the 5 years. So we do have family members that attend, but it all comes to say that that community, the passion, the conversation, the legacy around it is going to be everlasting, right? And so one thing that we know is constant, our community does not want to close schools. Our community wants to keep schools open. And so that's why I think in terms of reframing and rephrasing how we even position that will be a win-win for us. But in terms of communities, there's no, in my mind, a prioritization of what communities should be at the table. Even if you look at who's particularly living in a community at one particular point in time, because when we're having these conversations, somebody might live there, but they might move out and into another community, right?
So for me, I was speaking more on the needs of that certain community that school is serving. So if we're talking east to near east side, are we going to, does the prioritization of these factors, does that shift on this list based upon what that neighborhood is when we bring this group together to have the discussion?
And see, when I think about that, the list, the prioritize, if we're looking at these items, the items would stay the same for me. So for me, I would be thinking, if we're talking about the needs of the community, that we're doing community mapping, right? That we're partnering with Kerwin Institute or, another think tank that is coming in and determining how many grocery stores are there, how many medical facilities are there, what are the real job opportunities in that community? Is there a coffee shop where people can go get free access and Wi-Fi? We're not looking at any of those elements when we're thinking about closing a school or redesigning a school. And I will venture to say, and this is because I believe very strongly that our district is positioned and coded to educate, that it's not necessarily the job of our district to figure out how we are situated in that ecosystem of providing those additional community sources and resources. So I think from a very narrow aspect, if we were to do community mapping of this region to determine where there are educational deserts, that would be appropriate. But for us to step out of that box and start looking at, again, the grocery stores, the medical facilities, the coffee shops, that's outside of our scope. But I think looking in terms of what is that educational ecosystem, is there a high school, is there a middle school, are there, child care facilities, I think that's within our scope. But right now, that's not one of the items that are even there.
Right.
I would be interested to see other similar sized districts, or really districts nationwide, how they set up their policies, and if they have similar criteria, or if they have different criteria that we're not thinking about, or how they structure that, or if the criteria is an agreed upon item when you start the process, right? And so how much prescription, one, does this board want to do, what does this committee want to prescribe? But then two, what is the practice nationwide, and what have we learned? What are the successes with policies designed a certain way versus designed another way? And so I wonder, Mr. Brown or Mr. Woods, have you seen other policies nationwide that you would think of, in your opinion, as the model, or in your opinion as exactly what we don't want to do? Because we can learn just as much from both sides. And what do you think? What do you think about that?
So I think it's a great suggestion. I like it. And there are a couple models that come to mind that are kind of on different ends of the spectrum, but it might make sense to look at two completely different models. So, we all, or some of us, know kind of what's going on in cities like Detroit, right? So there's been significant school closures in that city. So it would be interesting to look at their school closing policy to see if we can glean any best practices or insights or things that we can learn from. On the flip side of that, you have this school district in Maryland, Prince George's County. They're pretty progressive. They're doing, I don't want to say a lot of new building, because very few K-12 districts are doing a lot of new building, but they are doing some new building. So they're closing with a focus on building new schools. So I'd be interested to maybe look at Prince George's County closing policy. And between the two of those, there's probably some things that we could consider for inclusion in our policy. I like that idea.
Yes, Ms. Smith.
So I'm definitely out of my depth in understanding all of this as a new committee member. As you were talking about other models, it would be also helpful to have an overview, similar to what you described, of what happened last time, what pushback on like the policy aspect, if there was, if it kind of the public feelings boiled down to some of these policy items. It would be good to know that, because I haven't been super familiar with, other than just upset feelings about schools closing, if there were parts of this. So to have more background information at a future meeting would be helpful.
That's great.
I was going to share that along the same lines when considering these. First of all, Dr. Pierce, thank you. I love the reimagining. I love the redesign as opposed to closing, because the negative connotation for closing, right? And I would love to see from some of those community conversations or community feedback sections that you had, I would love to see what is some of that input and some of that feedback that community had, and how did we consider that when we're talking about the policy and the changes and things like that. And dare I say, might be a little bit controversial, are we asking some of those who are in the charter schools, and so that we can bring them back to Columbus City Schools?
Not controversial.
Like, let's bring our people back. And what are some of those needs they have as we are reimagining and revisioning what not only does Columbus City Schools look like in the educational system, but what do some of our schools and our buildings, and using that as our framework of working buildings with plumbing and all this other kind of stuff, and identifying some of those things that drove some people to choose alternatives, and how do we bring them back, and what feedback have we received from them, and how is it utilizing here? Because I know the request was made for some kind of recommendations, and how is that used to format those recommendations? Because it's really great for staff and board members and all that other kind of stuff to get around and talk and come up with a plan. But we all know that when we come up with the plan, the community don't always, and then when it doesn't succeed, we blame the community. So I just really love to see how that's utilized.
Go ahead. I was actually, my question was for you, Chair. How long of a timeline do we have to complete our process?
So I don't know that we have a particular timeline at this point directed from the board. But I think that by next meeting, we would like to have more information presented to you. What I'm gathering is we would like examples of other cities, more clarity and background on what happened this last cycle, and then some ideas of how we might start integrating the process. As far as next steps, we do have 2 additional committees that really should be part of, actually all of our committees should be part of this conversation. So we do have a community advocacy committee, engagement and advocacy committee that could be part of the conversation around what should a policy prescribe as far as community engagement. We have a Dr. Pierce's committee, which she chairs, is the Academic and Facilities Management, I'm losing the name, Management Committee, that looks at future thinking, new builds, future thinking in our district and how our academic facilities and our academic environments work within that and how we want to move forward. We also have Dr. Pierce's committee, which is the Equitable Resource Management Committee, that looks at the assets that we currently have. So not only the buildings and the academic facilities, but also the land that we have and how we are utilizing current assets. And I think all 3 of those committees would be relevant to a conversation moving forward. But as far as what is our immediate next step, I think it's just gathering information. So at this point, I would like to have some input on where do you want to start? Where do we as a committee want to begin? And then continually bringing that information back to the board. As our board goes through this fall, we will be looking at not only the recommendations that came out of this most recent task force, but then how we as a board want to move forward with those. And so as we develop that may inform some additional information and things that we would want this committee to look at as well.
So I ask because it feels like this is a really good opportunity to do some human-centered design work. And this topic of closures is obviously very fresh in the minds of many community members, but those who are in the communities who are on the list of recommended closure sites. And I wonder if this, again, because it is so fresh, it would be possibly easier to get to them and ask them, you know, what do you think this process should look like? It may be you, and even others who are not on the list, but I think in terms of getting engagement from those most directly affected, that might be a good list, as well as if you got feedback, I'm sure you did this last round on the process that you utilized, that we could have that as well, that what did the community already say that they wanted from this process as it relates to closures, since that is this committee's focus at the moment. So human-centered design can look very formal. It can also look like, you know, doing informal focus grouping with families. I would just highly recommend that would be something we do here. It feels more readily available than it otherwise would be, and we should make use of it.
I agree.
If I might add, I think that is a great suggestion as I think about the committee structure and the work at hand. So these are 2 to 3 potential policies in addition to all the other policies that need to be updated and revised. So I want to be mindful as I make these comments of the time commitment that it takes for each one of these meetings, the time commitment that you all have given for whether it's a year term or multiple year terms on this committee, as well as the time commitment that it will take from our administrators and our teams to get this work to you all. So I wonder if by next meeting, everybody could give some thought to how this work could be approached and come with those ideas, and then we begin to look to see where it is best to partner, collaborate with those ideas. So as you brought up human-centered design, that's definitely our community engagement piece, right? So if we could give that idea to that committee and say, hey, here's a great opportunity for some human-centered design work that we might be able to do in conjunction as we think about revising these policies, then that committee could take that ball and run with it. When we're talking about the new builds, definitely that is our academic and facilities committee. So through Brown, Dr. Brown and Mr. Woods, as well as Chair Ingalls, being able to come to that committee and say, hey, we want you all to take a real deep dive on and keep it very concise on looking at these elements of prioritization that are currently used in regard to policy 7105, right? Is there some elements that you would definitely say should be a part of the new build versus a closing, right? If you went to Jennifer, board member Adair's committee and said, hey, you know, our committee again is looking at 7105. Are there some elements that your committee may be willing to take the deeper dive into as we're creating these policies, right? So I say all that to say we have an elephant that we need to eat. And we got to do it one bite at a time. And we have multiple committees that are in place to do this work, but we need to timeline it and structure it in such a way that the work can get done without burdening our committees and our teams.
I really like that suggestion. I appreciate all of that. And if everybody in the committee could please send your suggestions to me for thought on how we might be able to approach this work, because as Dr. Pierce just said, it is a massive, massive undertaking, and one that we can't have analysis paralysis, and we cannot sit on this forever. We have to get work product done, but to do that, we want to do it as informed and thoughtful as is possible. So if everybody could, by next meeting, give some thoughts to me on the approach of the work, we'll go ahead and present that, probably have additional information to present, and then continue having this conversation. So like I said, today was not to get pen to paper on a policy, but really just to introduce the concept and get you all started thinking on where we might be able to go with this policy. With that, we'll go ahead and move on to our next agenda item, which is 3.2, is the revision of policy 9150, which is school visitors, currently labeled school visitors. And so uploaded into board docs and in front of you all is a draft of 9150. What we discovered as a district is that we had a school visitor policy that applied to visitors going into a school building, but we did not have a policy that equally applied to district administration buildings or other pieces of property. And so what we're attempting to do with this policy has not been revisited since 2015. And so what we're attempting to do is bring in administrative buildings and other district property the same way that we treat visitors to our schools, and think about how we might want to prescribe that to set forth some guidance and some guidelines so that the folks working in our administrative building have a similar experience to the folks working in our schools, have a similar experience to folks on other pieces of property of the district. And so I asked Kyle to Ms. Lathwell to go ahead and put some thoughts on paper, and so she has done that and worked with our administrative team, our legal team, to really think through where are the places and spaces that we have gaps and where we do not have the guidance that is necessary in order to make this something that may equally apply. And then really to put critical thought into, does it make sense? Is it practical? Is it something that would allow us to get the work done and to move forward? So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Lothwell or to Mr. Barnes and allow them to give any insight or thoughts into the policy, and also, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of walking us through what you were thinking.
Well, I guess I can start. As Board Committee Chair Ingalls indicated, it's really an expansion of what's already in existence, it being limited to schools, and it's expanding it to our administrative buildings and other district property. So where you'll see throughout the current policy, it talks about the principal, it references the principal. The changes to the superintendent. For example, looking at the second paragraph, it's really referring to district buildings as well as schools, and it indicates the superintendent or the superintendent's designee or the principal has the authority to prohibit the entry of any person to a school. And what's added is administrative building or other district property. So throughout the policy, it's really just expanding it to cover all district properties. When you drop down to paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you will see that anyone visiting a school, well, this is specific to board members because it was the intent of the policy to also include board members as part of the general public. And it provides that if a board member is interested in visiting a school, administrative building, or other district property, and again, before it only related to the visitation of a school, and it's expanded to all district buildings now, administrative buildings and other district property, and the appropriate arrangements should be made with the superintendent, whether one is visiting a school or a district building. That's really the only change there as it relates to board members. And it also, and this is not a change, but there's some clarifying language in the second to last paragraph on page 1, where it talks about when a board member is attending a building, whether it's a school or other administrative building, they're attending that building in their capacity as the general public, unless they are authorized to be in that building conducting board business. So it's not intended to be a drop-by. It's intended for the board member to make arrangements with the superintendent to be present at that building. And of course, this is outside of attendance at regular board meetings or committee meetings.
So can I ask a question, or not yet?
Did you have anything first, Ms. Lothwell, before we get started?
I would just add to that I have some experience working at OSBA as a policy consultant where I saw how a lot of districts around the state dealt with this, and we are the largest district in the state. It makes us a little different. So this is a somewhat boilerplate, generic policy that a lot of districts in the state have via Neola. Similar policy for OSBA, but some of those districts are small. You can have the administration operating out of a building that is a school, and that policy works perfectly. We are larger. We have a lot of administrative buildings. We have a lot of school buildings. So for us to make this work for our district, expanding it makes sense. And so most of this language is to make that work, to expand it to all of our properties, to our administrative buildings, to all of our school buildings. By adding bylaw references and whatnot, that just clarifies the expectation. The individual board member visits, that's always been in this policy. It's always in OSBA's policy. And what the policies intend to do is make a point to differentiate an unofficial visit from an official visit. And so that ties back to the board bylaws that dictate how that works for our board members. Happy to answer any questions.
And as Kyle indicated, this is a policy that was created by Neola, and so the board or the district or board didn't create this policy. And just for some context, we have had situations where someone from the public has entered an administrative building not for the purpose of conducting business, but to create chaos. And so we've had to put internally processes in place where we can extract that person from the building, which does involve even contacting law enforcement to have that person removed. You might have noticed that when you came in, you saw notices regarding trespass. And we have statutes which allow any public agency to have someone removed if they're creating a disturbance and are refusing to leave. And again, and this is not related to board members, we did have an individual, again, who not only created chaos in this building, but also at 3700. So we do have those issues. So this was a prime time to try to expand our visitation policy.
Dr. Lunsford, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I love the fact that it's expanded because as someone who works in the violence prevention space, trust me, safety is my #1 priority. I get that completely. And maybe I'm reading too much into it and you can help me understand. My concern is so much about the distinction in the board members, right? Especially when it comes to official and unofficial capacity. And maybe that's in another policy of the many policies about what that unofficial and official capacity is. Because the board members are the only ones that are elected by the public, right? And so they are responsible to the public and they report to them. And so if someone chose to call Dr. Pierce, for instance, and says, hey, blah, blah, blah is going on, blah, 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 and she comes out to check it without going through, without going to Dr. Chapman or without going through the superintendent, and she shows up to check into something because it is deemed the best way to see if this situation is in a certain way without the opportunity of someone cleaning up and doing all this other kind of stuff. How does that then impact that?
It doesn't. The language regarding notification to the superintendent does not prohibit a board member from that visitation. You have to remember that the board only has 3 direct reports, and that includes the superintendent, the treasurer, and the auditor. And the superintendent is responsible for all of the buildings. So rather than it simply being contacting a principal at a school, it's simply changed to contacting the superintendent, who is responsible for all buildings. So if there is an issue, and the policy does provide that if the board member is visiting a school or any administrative building and they see an issue, they report it for the superintendent to address whatever that issue may be. Does that answer your question?
Sort of, kind of, but it doesn't give me a satisfactory answer. So I'm saying something like, if the public who has voted in Madam Chair calls Madam Chair and reports some kind of issue, and she goes, and Ms. Ingalls goes to South High School without calling anybody, without notifying anybody, because there is a need to get in there and check this out or whatever, without giving notice for people to clean some stuff up and figure some stuff out. How does that impact her entrance into the building to do whatever that official visit that, I don't know if that's clarified as an official visit through this policy or the other policy, or does this become a barrier then for the public to hold the board accountable for us voting you in, getting you in there, and expecting you to be that person that I can go to and say, hey, there's an issue, I need you to go check this out, and it is not conducive to call and set everything up before I go?
I think the question may be premised on the superintendent perhaps hiding something. When a board member cannot fix the problem. What the board member does is goes into the building, and because again, the board member's direct report is the superintendent. Right. So the board member sees an issue and directs the superintendent to handle that issue.
Okay. Then that's the clarity on that clarifies maybe the process that's in place, and maybe that's what I'm thinking about.
I think too, there's a question of, so generally, if there was something brought to me, my first call is going to be Christina Vera, who is our board president. And I'm going to inform her of whatever it is going on in the schools. And she may instruct me to take an action after that point. At that point, I think that we're looking at a different situation than just me, Sarah Ingalls, a board member, but by no means is it an official business if I'm just showing up somewhere. I think that those are distinctions that the policy would allow for. Dr. Pierce, you're making a face, so I'm going to let you.
Because that has happened, and things have happened in the moment where I have gone into schools to see exactly what is going on without a call to board leadership nor to the superintendent. What I will say is ultimately the visit did result in our students being able to use their restroom facilities, and those facilities being fixed very promptly and appropriately because a board member went and showed up. So the point that I think Dr. Lansford is making that is important is that there are particular instances where a board member, because there are 7 different board members who will respond differently, may deem it appropriate to go visit a site and to see what is going on. I think where the language needs to be tightened up in this policy is as it relates to official and unofficial. Because as Dr. Lansford is saying, if I get a phone call from multiple parents saying that their kids can't use a restroom at a school, I'm going to see what's going on. There should be no reason why our kids can't use a restroom, and what's the issue there, right? And so in that capacity, it's official. Now, did I call the superintendent and say, hey, what's going on with these restrooms? No, because we had that conversation before. So the assumption that the superintendent is hiding something wasn't an assumption. It really just related to work orders and work orders not being done. But had I not had the presence to go there and see it happening, those work orders could have set even longer, right? And so I think using that as an example, we can see that there's some gray line between what can be deemed official and unofficial. I think what this policy tries to get at is we don't want to disrupt environments. And so I wonder if we could literally strike out until we can firmly define what unofficial and official is, strike out unofficial from the policy and focus more on this disruptive and, going through procedures to clarify when individuals can visit.
Thank you.
And of course, it's the board's policy, so any suggestions that any committee member or board member may have regarding the language in the policy, please put that forward.
I guess, Mr. Barnes, is there a definition of official visit in some other policy or anywhere? I mean,
No.
I think.
An unofficial visit is, I believe, and this is just my, this is just my definition, and an unofficial visit is a visit that's not ordained by the full board.
Which can happen often. I have 2 students that play at Whetstone, and so I am at their games unofficially. I have multiple family members who play in sports and activities, and so I am at those games and ceremonies unofficially. And even though I'm not there officially, anytime I walk into a building, I am seen as board member Dr. Pierce.
Yeah, please keep in mind that the policy does provide that a board member can attend as any other visitor. So it's really a balance. Am I here as a board member directing someone to do something, or am I a visitor? And I noticed that something needs to be taken care of. That's not what this is attempting to prevent. It's simply board member in the house, stop what you're doing. And as Dr. Pierce said, it's intended to not disrupt things because that can happen. Board member in the house.
Yeah, I do think that disruption is the key factor here. And so when Dr. Pierce shows up to the school and asks about what's going on with the restrooms, if at any point that becomes a nuisance, there should be some mechanism by which the district can remove you if you're becoming disruptive. And that's already policy. That's already policy because that's a school. What we do not have is the ability to enforce similar measures if you show up at 270 or 3700, which I cannot imagine a reason why this building in particular, which houses administrative staff, houses our treasurer's department, some other departments. If you show up to this building unannounced, demanding to walk into people's workspaces, I can't imagine many situations where that would be appropriate. And if it is appropriate, I think that there are measures that the board could take to deem that an official action and to protect that activity. But at a certain point, if you're walking in as a board member or as a member of the public and walking in unannounced, it becomes harassing at a certain point. And that's not really, it's not our job as board members. It's not appropriate for any member of the public. And so there should be some ability of the district to inform somebody that your actions have become disruptive and to actually take the next step in being able to remove an individual.
And I think the caveat to those comments that you all should just be mindful of is that this building in particular, and correct me if I'm wrong in this, our administrators, houses the board office. So
Yes.
the office for the Board of Education, houses where Board of Education members would come to pick up their mail. I think, again, the focus should be on the disruption, because at any point, a board member should be able to come pick up their mail without calling and saying, hey, can I come pick up my mail, right? And so I think, again, there will be some growing pains as we adjust to this policy. So I do not think that in one go pass of this, we will fix it and everything will be okay and all right. So I would much rather us err on being open, as I suggested earlier, until we define the difference between unofficial and official, and specifically tie that into the definitions of the policy, that those should be strucken or striked from the policy.
Okay, and just to be clear, it's not asking for permission to either go to a school or an administrative office. It's just notice. It's not permission.
I have a question about non-board members, just members of the public. Is there another policy? It kind of gets to Dr. Pierce's point that about unofficial and official. Since board meetings happen in a district building, where is the line in a public member who's advocating being viewed as disruptive? Without it defined, or maybe it's another policy, I worry that, you know, in a future scenario with other folks, a person could view someone raising their voice while giving comments in a board meeting as disruptive. So maybe if you could help me understand how this would pertain or not pertain to members of the public coming to make comments during a board meeting or other proceeding.
I don't think that was considered in reviewing this policy.
I think that's a great question, though, is to really define what that means, or at least think about how we may define some of what that means. Because certainly, members of the public are more than welcome to come to board meetings and provide public testimony, to provide input in the process, to speak to their board members, and to participate in the process. They're welcome to come to this committee as well. So I think that that's a key component, and one that we should really look at.
Yes, and I will say one thing, that it is really, I think there can be definitions, but it's real difficult to define, because you can be disruptive without raising your voice. You can be disruptive just by your actions or the way you say something that may intimidate someone. And so, and a lot of it is subjective. What may not bother me will terrify you, or the other way around. So there has to be some subjectivity in there. I think the test would be a reasonable, what in the legal world we call a reasonable person, but even that has different definitions.
We, the organization I work for, it comes up in, like, what is a disruptive comment on social media? I think I have a pretty wide tolerance of, if you're giving complaints and you're a stakeholder of our organization, we should hear that. And then other folks, any complaint is a troll who's, you know, trying to do a lot of harm. So I think it should be reasonable, but it also can't be that a future board member or administrator could define it so narrowly that anyone who steps even a little bit out of the line would be eligible for removal from a board meeting.
Because I think the policies, yeah, I agree, because I think the policies definitely have to be rooted in reality, and there are some hurting people, and there are some people, there are some injustices that happen, and we have to keep that in mind. And having and limited access, and I'm just saying, I just think that I love the fact of the definition of what disruption means, as well as what is official and non-official, because I just think of the kids or the parents that don't perceive themselves as having voices and are scared to speak up. And I finally speak up, and I call my board member who is responsible to me because I elected you in.
Mm-hmm.
And I expect you to be able to have access to go in and maybe at least fix something like that. The presence alone, right? We know a presence of certain people alone is going to cause action or whatever. And is that disruptive when you got a school where ideally, you know, we would love to think that there's nothing going wrong in our schools or anything like that. But if you have a school and you wouldn't think people are being denied access to the restroom, because she could go in there, you know, and that's just not the only example. So I just think that our policies need to be rooted in reality, and those are some of the things that we need to take into consideration.
Chair Ingles, could I just?
Yes, go ahead.
So I just, being a very technical person, I just want to get back to just splicing the policy a little bit. The first 5 paragraphs aren't related to just board members. They're related to everyone. So I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we're trying to expand coverage of this to spaces with safety in mind, right? We want to be able to handle people that are disruptive in all of our spaces for safety reasons, as, you know, and so there's a line there. What is a safety concern versus a disruption? I understand that. Those terms are, as James said, they're subjective oftentimes and hard to define. But even in the paragraphs that tie to individual board members, where it does feed into that, if you look at the language that is expanded here, at least by what we were trying to do today, and I'm not saying there's not an opportunity for more work, because there always is, but that language in green is really just focusing on that expansion and making the language work for administrative buildings and district property as well as schools. We add superintendent there because that is who's over the administrative buildings versus the schools, which is principal, which is there still because that ties back to a school. The language about the bylaws and inserting those specific sites, it's already telling you need to follow the bylaws. We're just saying what bylaws those are, which makes it easier for people to refer to and understand what they're being told. So I just wanted to point that out. And the final one on the second page is simply that we're going to hold our board members to the same standard we hold the rest of the community. If you're being disruptive and you're asked to leave, then you're expected to leave. Again, the word disruptive, you know, is not easily defined. But I just wanted to come back to that and just state that if you really look at the language, most of it, at least what we're trying to do today, is to expand to additional spaces.
So can I ask a couple of questions and then give some recommendations? Is it the goal to have this policy recommended to the board by our next board meeting on September 17th? Was that the hope?
It was the hope. I don't think that it's a firm, we have to do it. If we need another meeting, we need another meeting.
So I think if that's the hope, I'm confident that this committee can narrow it down to get us something to give to the board. With that in mind, I would like to make the following recommendations. On line 1, where it says the board welcomes and encourages visits to school, could we change that to schools by parents, et cetera, et cetera? Where you get to the third line, where
When you say line 1, what line?
Line 1 of the policy, it says the Board of Education welcomes and encourages
Okay.
visitors to school. Can we say schools, plural?
I think the intent is to make this more broad so that it's not just schools, it's schools, administrative buildings, and other
It just seems
district
that
property.
that should be a plural, it shouldn't be school, it should be schools.
I think
Oh,
we
I see
can
what you're saying.
We can
oversight. Would you
put
be
it
agreeable? I
through
see what you're saying.
Grammarly, but it should be schools.
Yeah.
Thank you. Then we go down to the third line underneath that where it starts with administration and staff to continue. That continue is struck out. Would it be possible to remove must remain undisturbed? Because again, that is subjective. I feel that if we remove, strike through, must remain undisturbed, the essence of the policy is still there, but it doesn't give that subjective element of what is the definition of disruptive. How do we feel about that? Remove, again, strike out, remove, must remain undisturbed. Because again,
So how do you complete that sentence?
so you complete it by saying administration and staff, open that up to say continue the work of the district when visitors are present.
At the same time, the educational program and the important work of district administration and staff.
Must continue or should continue, shall continue when visitors are present in the district buildings.
I think that sentence then would say a different meaning than what is intended. So that would put a mandate on, essentially the way that that sentence would be constructed is it would put a mandate on the administration and the school employees, staff employees, to continue doing the work when there are visitors in the building, instead of the intent of the sentence, which is to give the opportunity to tell somebody you're being a disruption, and therefore, that's why you need to.
I don't think it takes it out, because if I can't continue my work because you're being disruptive, I can still ask you to.
But you're
I can
removing the
still say
operative
you're
phrase
removed.
that would take that away.
I think continue is framing it in the work still needs to continue, but disruptive is saying that there's something negative that has to happen. We're just not pointing out that something negative has to happen. The term that we've been discussing in terms of disruption comes with a negative connotation that is very subjective. So I'm trying to figure out how we can remove that term but keep the essence of the policy. And so if an administrator finds that the work can't continue, then it's within my rights to say that you can be removed.
So are we saying, I was having trouble following along, so I'm going to read the whole sentence in case others were having the same problem. You're suggesting something like, at the same time, the educational program and the important work of the district administration and staff must continue when visitors are present in the district buildings, blah, 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 blah.
Yes.
I think that is a great suggestion.
Thank you. Anybody else want to give feedback? Trying to get us there. I'm trying.
Does that alleviate the concern you had, Chair, or what?
Yes.
Okay.
While we're splicing, it can be interpreted to mean, despite the disturbance, the work must go on.
That's how I'm hearing it
Yeah,
as well.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think that was my initial concern.
I think I agree. I guess I wonder if there's another way to deal with it. I mean, I recall in our conversation about the charter, like there was some phrase, I was just looking at it, that was like, we welcome participation. You know, is there another way to say, you know, the disruption schools can't be disrupted, you know, and, you know, reiterate the policy of the district to welcome, you know, to get around the concern about whether people sharing their viewpoint about what the board is doing is going to be viewed as disruption. You know, on the other hand, you know, we welcome participation in board meetings and conversations and reiterate community members' First Amendment rights and stuff like that.
If I can add, I hear that. I'm also reading this first paragraph as kind of a framing paragraph, and we later go into more tactics. And so what I'm hearing from you, Dr. Pierce, correct me if I'm wrong, is that just seems like unnecessarily, like an unnecessary word to add into this top piece when we do also go down and talk about disturbances directly.
Yeah.
Yes, it's in 2 other areas, to be specific.
I see what you guys are saying.
Do you mind if I chime in just for a minute?
Yes. No, I do not mind.
I'm big on words, so I feel like what is trying to be said here, first of all, we're not using the word disrupted in that paragraph, it's undisturbed. So I think the idea is that we want our spaces where our students are being educated and our staff is working to remain undisturbed. So it's almost like we're going to do something when it becomes disturbed versus we're trying to define what is disruptive or not. It's disruptive if things get disturbed, if that makes sense. And we're just making a statement that we want our spaces not to get disturbed.
Yes,
I think that's all we're doing there.
But I think the point still remains that it's subjective for one to determine when it is disturbed. And framing it simply as the work should and shall continue is saying that we need to be about the work of educating kids. If that ever stops, then you have grounds to have that person removed.
So to pile on to that, I think if something must continue, it is remaining undisturbed. Aren't you saying the same thing if you say that way? So if the important work of the district administration and staff, you would get rid of the comma, must continue when visitors are present, is that the same thing as saying the important work of the district administration and staff must remain undisturbed?
If you're asking me, I agree with what James said on that it sounds like it must continue no matter what. That's how, I mean, that's just, isn't that what you said?
So you would,
But
you
it's
would
different,
strike
though,
out
when
the
it comes
must
to the
remain.
schools, and when you add the administrative buildings, because the only thing I'm thinking really about is school board meetings. And there's gonna be some disruption sometimes. You talk about closing schools and all that kind of stuff. I can't have disruption. You are now violating my right to have a protest. So, so when you're saying must be undisturbed, a school board meeting, when you're adding the administrative buildings, has to be taken in consideration as well. There's gonna be some unruffled feathers. There's gonna be some disruption.
Is there a way to think about this? I mean, because I understand the purpose of the sentence as intent setting. So is there a way to say, it is the intent of this policy that work is allowed to, is able to continue? Or it is, just to get around the
I think the
use of disturb?
Yeah, I think if I'm reading the first paragraph, the intent is both to set the stage that we welcome visitors, we welcome our community into our schools, into our administrative buildings, onto our property. However, there are boundaries with that. So if you are coming in, obviously, we want you to walk into central enrollment. We want you to walk into places where it makes sense, right? And we want you to participate in the education of your child and the education of your community. But what we're setting it forth is, we want all of those things. It's important to us, therefore it's in a board policy. But the minute that we can no longer do what we're supposed to be doing, which is educating children, and our staff working on the things that allow us to educate children, that's where it becomes a problem. I think that's the intent of that first paragraph, is just to level set that.
So again, why can't we say work shall continue?
In regards to conduct at board meetings, there's already a separate policy that addresses that and addresses conduct at the board meetings. So this is completely separate from conduct at board meetings.
So in just this first paragraph, would it be possible for us to simply state that the work of the district or the work shall continue when visitors are present?
I feel like we need to be able to say that, semantics aside. That's a thing we should be able to say.
Yeah.
So the rest of this policy goes into detail about the fact that disturbances occur and they should be addressed. I think that's important. But what are we doing here if we can't just
Do we
say
hear,
that?
yes, so do we have a consensus that we will wordsmith it some type of way to say work shall continue, just in that first paragraph? And we will remove must remain undisturbed. Is that okay? Do we have consensus with that?
With that.
I hear your concern, James, but I do think that there's a way that we could wordsmith this to both achieve the work must continue, but integrate that the work will, I understand your concern is that you're saying that we cannot prescribe that the work will continue despite disturbance, and I don't think that's the intent of this paragraph.
I look forward to your wordsmith.
Work on it. Yeah. I hear what's being said. Yeah.
So then I think when we get down to the second paragraph, where the first sentence says superintendent or designee or principal, should we also just include administrator? There are some times when a principal may not be in a building. It may be the assistant principal. It may be, I don't know. Do we have some leeway in that?
School administrator?
Yes, could we put school administrator?
Who's a school
That's a
administrator?
rhetorical question.
I'm asking, can we just keep it open? Because it might be the assistant principal. When you put principal, that is
I think
clearly
that's
the
appropriate.
principal. So could we change that to school administrator?
I do too. I think that probably applies to more than this policy. That
Okay.
kind of change.
And it's in two places in that paragraph. So wherever you come down to that second green highlighted spot where it says superintendent, designee, or principal, can we just put school administrator there? Thank you. And then I think in this paragraph, it calls out or creates a disturbance. So that's where you're getting your disruption to the work being done. So I just wanted to point that out. That is where it's saying it creates a disturbance. And at that point, because we have placed the superintendent designee or school administrator is authorized to request assistance, that is then putting the burden of providing how did it create a disturbance on the school administrator, on the superintendent or designee. Like, that person has to be able to say, it disrupted the school day, it disrupted our bail schedule, it disrupted our staff from being able to answer the phone, it disrupted, right? So that designates an individual who is then responsible for saying specifically the disturbance that was created. So it takes some of the subjectivity away from it. Is everybody following my logic there? I'm sorry. Does that make sense, legal team?
Was there a suggestion within that, or was your only suggestion the strikeout principal and put school administration? Or administrator?
But it also provided the rationale for keeping the disruption in there that clarifies.
Okay,
why this
that's what I'm asking, is did you
Yes.
make a suggested change, or are you just reading the rest?
I made 2 suggested changes and then gave the rationale. And then I wonder, should trespass at the end of that paragraph be trespassing, or should it say trespass?
Trespassing.
Trespassing, yes, so that's my third recommendation. We moving, come on, y'all, we got this. I'm out here like cameras ain't watching us. We still have it in that paragraph. What is this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 6th paragraph, where we cite unofficial basis and official. Is there, and then unofficial is there again. Because we are citing specific bylaws, do we have to call out the distinction between unofficial and official?
Since we're on paragraph 6 here, my thoughts were that the first 3 lines, all the way up to the word consistent, they don't really seem needed if we're already calling back to these bylaws that's typically seem that they say the same thing.
I like that. Do we have to specifically call out individual board members there?
That makes me so much more comfortable without calling.
Do they say the same thing?
They don't specifically say the same thing. One of them cites the code of conduct in general for board members. Another is public expression of members, because speaking on behalf of the board, speaking as an individual board member is not speaking for the full board, and there are bylaws tied to that. So that's what these are. So they don't say exactly the same thing.
I think you're talking about 2 different things.
Oh, okay, sorry.
As I look at that first sentence, I tend to agree with Javante that first sentence can be deleted. Because it's referring to.
Yeah, I was,
Yeah, you were referring to those
Yes.
2.
yeah, I was referring to a different sentence.
I agree. Do you agree, Chairwoman?
Sorry, I'm reading through the bylaws to make sure.
Okay.
Such a responsible chair.
There's just a lot of bylaws. So the board staff communications, so the premise of the first line is that if you're visiting a school, administrative building, or other district property, that you would notify the superintendent, a designee, or I believe that we're going to change that one as well to school administrator. In the board staff communications, board communications to staff, it says that it would go through the board's direct reports, and that staff communications to the board would go through the direct reports. So in premise, what we would be doing is modifying if you were going to, because this only applied to school buildings. So it would be going from telling the superintendent designee or school administrator to telling a direct report. And I think we want the flexibility of all of those things, right?
Okay, I'm a little confused now. So were you looking at 0148?
Yeah,
Because I'm looking at
48.1.
I'm looking at 0123, and that's the code of ethics. So if we struck out, as committee member Mr. McDonald shared, if we struck out that first sentence and just went consistent with board bylaws 0123, it picks up, I think, what the tone and tenor of this policy is without needing that first sentence there.
I think it picks up the tone and tenor. I think that it changes who you need to notify. Because I think that board bylaws policy 148.1 says that we need to go to a direct report. Our direct reports are the superintendent, the treasurer, and the, Mr. back there, we have our internal auditor. So, Mr. O'Connor back there. So what this would change to say is that we need to notify one of those three people instead of we need to notify the superintendent designee and/or a school administrator.
So right now, board members couldn't go to the school without notifying someone.
To a school, yes, you would have to notify the superintendent or designee, is the way that it's written currently, or principal.
Even if I'm going to a game or,
No.
okay.
Yeah, generally no, yeah, yeah. If you're making a specific visit, then yes, you need to notify under the policy.
Well, right
Well,
now,
to me, it
this says
says unofficial basis.
So if you're going for a game, if I'm going to,
Mm-hmm.
then so that's what.
Well, if you're going to a game, you cannot be disrupting school business.
But
the
according
way
to
it's
this,
written-
you have to
Yeah,
call the
but it's-
superintendent.
That's not how we operate. I mean, I can go to a game tonight if I wanted. I don't need to call the superintendent. But I'm going through the public entrance. I'm telling people who I am upon arriving. So in practice, that's not how we're doing it.
Can we just remove on an unofficial basis from that first sentence?
And if you remove the first sentence, we would need to remove such on the second sentence, consistent with board bylaws, board member visit shall, because without the first sentence is the.
Yeah, so we remove
Yeah,
the
that's the
second
first
sentence.
thing, simple.
Remove on an unofficial basis. And
I'm sorry, I didn't follow
I like
that last piece. Would you re-explain
The word
that?
such would then need to be stricken because consistent with board bylaw, such board member would be the board member referenced in the first sentence. So if that sentence is gone, we would say consistent with board bylaws, board member visit shall not be.
I see what you're saying.
just to clarify, I wasn't suggesting getting rid of the whole first sentence. I was just suggesting getting rid of
Oh, Mr. McDonald was.
Yeah.
official basis. I know. I'm sorry. That's a good point.
So if we keep that first sentence, I support removing unofficial from that sentence.
Yeah.
And I still think it's achieving the goal.
Removing on an unofficial basis. Yeah.
So we're going to remove
Yeah.
that.
And then that keeps the directive of who you're informing.
And then I guess you would also remove of this nature in the last sentence.
So if you're attending
But that's kind of.
a sports event, are you visiting a school?
During-
So if you look at bylaw 0148.1, C discusses social interaction of board members at things like games. And the fact that you're going to mingle with the community, talk about things, it just, again, reiterates that individual board members don't speak
I see.
for the entire board.
Yes,
So that
that
is
is
touched
covered.
upon there.
That is covered in the bylaw.
Yes.
Are we able to change, shall make the appropriate arrangements to simply saying notify?
Yeah.
I'm just going to say that, like, these policies are supposed to be everyone's handbook to understanding how the district operates. And I know I worked for a highly accessible elected official, and the incoming was all day long, and people knew that we could help cut through red tape to get things done. That has its pros and its cons, the only con being that we can be a cut through from an otherwise good process that people need to use because it's made to be efficient. But this just sounds like it doesn't want the supervision of board members, and I think that that lands the wrong way to the public. So if we simply are only asking for a notification, I'd really like for it to just say that. Is there any other arrangement that is required of board members specifically?
That was Neola language, that wasn't changed.
Yeah, I was gonna
I'll
say.
just clarify that. That was already, that's there that all the other districts use. I don't have an issue with changing it to notify.
Yeah.
I think that's appropriate.
I agree, and it gives
So-
us consistency.
Yeah, I agree. So for clarity, I'll read the first sentence with the suggested changes, although I understand Mr. McDonald suggested striking the whole sentence. But if we make it with the changes that I'm understanding, individual board members who are interested in visiting schools, administrative buildings, or other district property shall notify the superintendent/designee or school administrator, consistent with board bylaws, blah, blah, blah. The rest of that remains. Without the word such. Consistent with board bylaws, board member visits shall not be considered to be official unless designated as such by the board.
Question for you. You were saying that one of the other policies mentions the 3 employees that you have,
Yes.
superintendent, treasurer, and auditor, Mr. O'Connor in the back there. Does it preserve those as options for you, or does it say that you're also supposed to notify them? Just trying to make sure that we reconcile those 2 policies correctly when we list the superintendent designee or building administrator only there.
That's a good question, because the way that the board bylaw is written, it's that staff communication, or I'm sorry, board communication to staff says all official communications, policies, and directives of the board of staff interest and concern to the staff will generally be communicated through the board's direct reports, who shall also keep staff members informed of the board's concerns and actions.
But does that just apply to official action visits? I was trying to. But didn't you use the?
It doesn't define it
But
exactly.
okay.
Yeah.
And I think what also makes this interesting is that a board member could be meeting with one of the direct reports that's not necessarily the superintendent, and if that direct report's office is located in the same building or a different building, then you're hand tying the other direct reports to be able to meet with their board member.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that whole paragraph has to be reworked.
I think like that's here.
So
Or-
can you reference the,
In this one, maybe with this policy, the definition of superintendent or designee becomes the internal auditor and the treasurer are just included in this particular policy as a designee.
In practice, that would never happen. Kevin O'Connor, our internal auditor, wouldn't even take your call. No, in practice, that wouldn't happen, and throughout the policy, it refers to the superintendent. So I think I do get that the site is to a policy that references all 3 directs, but in practice, it wouldn't. I just can't come up with language at this moment to address that concern.
Or maybe superintendent or in superintendent's absent designee. No?
No, but because it would still go to one of the 2 direct reports.
is direct reports a defined like term of art somewhere? Can you say that it's it's actually confusing here to say, you couldn't just say what I want to say here, which is superintendent designee or building administrator or other direct report.
Direct reports should be defined in Ohio Revised Code. I mean, it sets forth the duties of a board member, so I would think, but it's not referred to in this policy, so.
There might be some exception language if I work all night on it that I could come up with.
Okay.
Can we leave it permissive, knowing that there may be some on-the-job learned habits about whom you should reach out to? Just to say superintendent, building administrator, or treasurer, or this needs, I would assume this policy needs to be useful to you as well, and it's hard to hand you a policy that directs you to 3 other policies to know what you're supposed to do to be in compliance.
Yeah.
So,
I think we should just say what we mean instead of referring back and forth a billion times. Just say what we mean. We will work that up.
And what sentence are we on?
We're still on that same paragraph.
If those bylaws apply, 0148 and 0148.1, we can get rid of that last sentence.
Well, I think that last sentence is trying to say that, again, the board member can't speak on behalf of the board when they are at unofficial visits. And I just wonder if instead of us saying unofficial visits of this nature, can we strike out of this nature and just say during unofficial visits, individual board members must comply with bylaws 0148 and 0148.1.
Yes.
So we strike that part out.
That makes sense to me.
Do we have any more for that policy? For that?
Yeah, the paragraph right after, we're missing the word visit. The board members' visit shall be as an interested individual.
Yeah, there's a typo there.
I was gonna say the same.
I like that. Visit. And then it becomes, okay, yes. Then it's grammatically correct too.
Yeah, it needs to be grammatically.
did we satisfactorily address your question earlier about people who are advocating at public meetings?
Yeah, I wanted to come back to that at the beginning part of this because it still reads to me, like in the second paragraph, the first sentence, with the addition of district property, that it seems to me that you could have a superintendent or designee or principal who just views negative comments as disruptive to the meeting, and then expels that person without due process. And I was wondering, Mr. Barnes referenced separate bylaws for conduct at a board meeting, that maybe that could be referenced here. I don't know how or where, but to say that essentially visitors need to comply with that bylaws policy, and if not, then this is the process for removal. Just to summarize, the addition of district building in this policy, to me, really throws in this whole other bylaw of conduct in board meetings.
That makes sense to me, to include some sort of reference to there's a policy about conduct at board meetings, and that still applies, and, you know,
Yes.
we encourage public participation.
Yes, yes.
Great.
Yeah.
So what are we gonna put right there?
We can put some language in that refers, because I think it's 0619 or 0691 or whatever it is.
69.1.
Who?
We'll figure it out.
Okay. Yeah, we know what's, it's the public comment policy. We can add some language that'll make clear that it does not apply to this, that this policy doesn't apply to
Okay.
public comment policy. Can do that.
All right, so we will Any other questions or comments at this point? We will rework this, bring it back to the committee for hopefully what is a final review at the December board meeting. If you think about this policy and have any suggestions or changes as you are thinking it through, please reach out to me and we will work that up. But I will task Mr. Barnes and Ms. Lathwell with going back to the drawing board on this one.
Madam Chair, given that this committee has done quite good work this evening, and our legal team has committed to making some of those grammatical changes, I wonder if this committee would give approval that the board could see a rough draft of this once legal team has made the various changes on our next board meeting, which would be Tuesday, September 17th.
Just to clarify, that's saying that we would we be providing approval of that, or? Oh, in advance, okay. So you're
So in
asking us
advance,
to-
I'm asking you all to say, are we confident that we have given substantial recommendations, that once legal makes a couple more revisions in additions to the ones that we gave, that the board could just see a draft of this?
The board could see a draft, they wouldn't vote on it.
Potentially, potentially the board could take action. How would you feel about that if the board did take action?
There isn't a motion, but I'm assuming we can just keep with discussion, Chair? I'm fine with that. Speaking for myself, I know we have 2 passionate board members who will be on that board to vote. So I think in the interest of business, we've made a lot of great suggestions and changes here that have been taken to heart, so I'm fine with that.
You have our commitment that we will continue to be diligent in ensuring that the policy, the words, the tone, and the tenor.
I'm good with both of your commitments.
Thank you. Okay.
So I motion that we recommend policy
91.
code, what is this, policy 9150 for review by the Columbus Board of Education, giving that all the corrections, revisions, and changes that were discussed here are made, in addition to the, I think it was 2 to 3 that legal said they would bring in addition. Is there a second?
A second.
Oh, I'm sorry, you were supposed to.
Oh, yeah.
I'm fine. I'm letting, I like it. Ms. Lathwell, would you please call the roll?
Oh, 1 second.
I'm sorry, any discussion before we take a vote? Hearing none, Ms. Lathwell, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Chair Ingalls,
Yes.
Dr. Pierce,
Yes.
Elsie Ellingson,
Yes?
Dr. Lunsford,
Yes.
Devontae McDonald,
Yes.
Danielle Smith,
Yes.
Jesse Vogel.
Yes.
Passes.
Motion carries. All right, thank you all. And
I
so,
think that was the first policy that this board, that this committee has recommended.
well, we recommended Title IX.
It was a whole package, wasn't it?
It was a whole package.
But yes, okay, look at.
Look at us. So we're going to move on to item 3.3 and finally 3.4, both of which Ms. Lathwell is going to carry us through. And she has some short, brief updates for us.
Yes,
to
very
close out.
short. As you all remember, we brought a very large package of Title IX non-discrimination bullying policies in front of you, asked for your patience in looking at such a large package, which we appreciated. That was back on June 27th. After discussion and feedback, there was consensus to move that forward to the board. On the 6th of August, those policies were adopted by the board as they were presented in a first reading. Due to the critical nature of the policies, the second reading was waived. So thank you to the committee for your first large package of policies that went through here. And the next thing is just there's going to be a fiscal policy package coming before you in December. I don't have all the details. I just know that it will be several policies. There's been federal law changes impacting that, and we're also taken an opportunity to look at our other fiscal policies for things that we might want to change due to practice or them being outdated. So I'm going to keep Chair Ingalls posted, but you can expect that package to come in December.
Any other items for the good of the committee?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
I think I recall that at the last meeting, there was a discussion of how we were moving the Title IX package forward. It was going to be given to the board for approval, and then there might have been additional changes after that. Do you have any update on that?
James?
Additional changes, I mean, due to
Well,
federal government or something?
Well, there's a possibility that the entire package could change because there's a Title IX 2024 version, and that's being challenged in court. It's, for us, because we're in the Sixth Circuit, the 2024 regs do not apply because of the injunctions. Those are still up on appeal. So the court could, and it could reach the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court could very well say that the 2024 regs are in place. And so we'd have to get another package together. But as of now, we are under the 2020 regs.
Okay. I think I recall there was also a conversation about like consent negotiations or something with the Department of Education, and that you expected you might see additional changes.
Well, yes,
from them.
there was the United States Department of Education Civil Rights Division had filed a complaint against the district, was it 10 years ago? And so they finally got to it, and we entered into a resolution with them, and the resolution included that we would have the Title IX regs in place. So we do have those regs in place, so we've satisfied the resolution with the feds.
Okay. So do you expect that package to come back to us at some point this year, or no?
It will not be this year.
Okay.
It will be sometime after January 6th. If that date means anything.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Any other questions for the good of the committee? Yes.
And I could be behind. On the minutes from June, it says that committee's governance work and potential subcommittee, the chair suggested the formation of a subcommittee focused on governance. The committee agreed to receive a briefing on school board governance at the next meeting. Did we already do that?
We have not yet appointed the subcommittee. That is work that we will need to continue. So thank you for calling that out. I should have updated you on that. But yes, we need to do that and need to appoint that committee and create that work.
Madam Chair, is there anything else we should keep in mind for the next meeting in terms of what's on the horizon?
Yes. So I think it's fair to assume that we will be revisiting Policy 7105, closing of school buildings, and thinking about how we want to integrate that, as we've discussed. And then the fiscal policy package will be the big thing coming down the pike for that meeting. So that's what we should expect. As is with any large organization, policy needs may change, and they can change quickly. So I reserve the right to amend to that future agenda based on the need of the organization and the board. But that's probably the bulk of what we will be doing at our December 9th meeting.
And the governance piece, will the board governance piece come?
Yes, board governance piece. Thank you for that call out.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting, please?
Motion to adjourn?
Need a second?
Second.
Ms. Lathwell, would you please call the roll?
Chair Ingalls?
Yes.
Dr. Pierce?
Yes.
Kelsey Ellingson?
Yes.
Dr. Lunsford?
Yes.
Javante McDonald?
Yes.
Danielle Smith?
Yes.
Jesse Vogel?
Yes.
With that, the committee is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.